Hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Barbara Hahn, and welcome to my history class, The Old South, here in the horrible summer of our pandemic, 2020. I hope you are able to stay safe and well. Let me also assure you that I've been teaching online for several years already. This is not the kind of course that got rushed online this past spring, but rather something I've painstakingly put together over quite a few years of trial and error. Also, I'm living and working in Lubbock, over here in Tech Terrace, where I record these lectures. And I hope to hear from you at some point in the semester. Don't hesitate to log into Zoom or to phone during my office hours just to introduce yourselves. The worst thing about teaching online is that I don't get to put your face to your name and to your work. I'd love it if you changed that. So here's a little introduction to me. I did my PhD in Southern History at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, where I wrote a history of the U.S. tobacco industry and its interaction with tobacco agriculture over 300 years. This became my first book, Making Tobacco Bright. Then, with a friend of mine from graduate school, I wrote a book called The Cotton Kings, about cotton futures trading in the early 20th century, and a couple of guys from New Orleans who cornered the world market in cotton twice, and no one had ever heard of it. So, as you can see, my research focuses on Southern history, especially its business history and technology history. Most of the classes I teach focus on Southern history, business history, and the history of technology. This class teaches mostly general Southern history, but it still emphasizes those things that interest me most, along with the more traditional political history and the newer trends in global and cultural history. To begin, let me apologize for the fact that I have to read my lectures instead of just talking to you. It's a federal requirement that course materials be available to all students. Even those who can't hear have to be able to access my lectures. That means they have to be closed captioned, which means that the closed captioning needs to be the same thing I'm saying. So, rather than hem and haw and trust the transcription service to understand the technical language I'm using, I write out the whole lecture. And then I'm afraid I have to read it. So I'll be looking down at my text here below the camera in order to do so. Likewise, the program that films these lecture videos is somewhat clunky. It films myself and my computer screen, and then I edit the two together, cutting back and forth between my head and the PowerPoint. But I can't see what's happening on my screen while the program does the filming. I can only see myself. And sometimes when I edit the video track doesn't exactly line up with the audio track. They get out of sync, and I'm talking about an image that doesn't appear until later. My apologies. I'm trying to keep the lectures interesting, but my tools are limited. Most lectures are short. Most are less than half an hour, but there are a few exceptions. You'll see for yourself as the semester progresses. I've also put the lectures on YouTube, so you can watch the lectures at double speed if you wish, and slow things down if things get complicated. And in Southern history, things do get complicated. So let's start by having a look at the syllabus, and I'll talk some about how this class is going to work. Each week consists of several units, each of which has a lecture or two, a reading or two, and then a quiz that's due on Friday at 3 p.m. You should work your way through the lectures and assignments for each unit, do the quiz, and then move on to the next unit. There are usually 2 or 3 units a week, meaning that there are 2 or 3 quizzes due every Friday. But each week has no more than 15 or 20 questions total. All of the course is available to you now, so you can work through at your own pace. So this week is kind of a model for the rest. Read the syllabus, which tells you what is due when. This week you have 3 units to complete. You'll read Alexander Stephens' cornerstone speech from 1861, and then you take a quiz. Then you can move on to the next unit on agriculture, and after that, the one on empire. All of these are due this Friday at 3 p.m. Central Time. This is the way it's going to work each week. Now, about this week's reading assignment. The cornerstone speech is a primary source. It was delivered by the Vice President of the Confederacy after 7 Southern states had seceded from the Union, but before there was actual shooting conflict and war. It dates from the climactic moment of this class, the secession of Southern states from the Union and the formation of the Confederacy and the start of the Civil War. The goal of this assignment is to tell you where we're going and to establish evidence for the argument I'm going to be making over the course of this semester about the causes of the Civil War. I'm arguing that the Civil War was about slavery, and the entire story I'm telling over the whole semester supports that argument. This doesn't mean that the Northerners were united in moral disapproval of the South and the slave system. Quite the contrary, only a few of them felt that way. But white male Southerners, the only ones who could vote, were united firmly behind the defense of slavery as an institution and believed that it needed to extend into the West in order to preserve opportunities for white men. And for this reason, they jealously guarded their political power. They eventually felt so threatened by the election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860, the nominee of the Republican Party, which hadn't even existed 8 years earlier. Immediately after the election, the Southern men felt so threatened, they began to get their states out of the Union, out of the United States, to form their own nation, the Confederacy. They didn't even wait for Lincoln to be inaugurated, and they were the ones who fired the first shots of the Civil War at Fort Sumter in South Carolina. That's what I'm arguing in this class, because every piece of historical analysis needs an argument. I'm not just telling you names and dates because they're interesting, but rather they're evidence for what happened. They support my argument, my claim. And you'll need to construct your own argument about the causes of the Civil War, because that's the essay question you'll be asked on your final exam. That's right. I'm telling you what the final exam question is. What caused the Civil War? So be prepared to figure that out, and to marshal evidence beyond your claim. And be prepared to be specific. If the white Southerners were fighting for states' rights, you have to name what those rights are. Alexander Stephens knew. And this gets me to the other goal of the assignment, of reading Alexander Stephens' cornerstone speech. I want you to get used to reading primary sources, sources that are left over from the past. They're the basis of secondary sources, which are written by people later, people like me and you. You and I interpret the primary sources to offer an argument and a story about what happened and why it happened, and how the events of the past fit together and become the present. Because the real goal of this class is to teach you the very basics of what historians do. We use primary sources to construct arguments about the past. We use secondary sources, other people's interpretations, to explain why our argument matters and what it adds to what we know. And you're going to do the same thing over the course of the summer. It's very exciting. After this first unit, which I call Cornerstone, we really get started. All the lectures have outlines that are available to you already here on Blackboard. Let's have a look. See, you do this, and you do this, and you can print out the lectures from here, or download them to your computer. These outlines should be the basis of the notes you take on each lecture. The outline will also be on the PowerPoint during the lecture, so you can follow along. Each lecture outline also has a list of terms that you should be able to identify after the lecture is over. Each outline also has a thesis statement at the top, so you know what I am arguing. Every lecture that I write deploys evidence in support of an argument or a thesis statement, a claim that can be supported and defended with evidence. This is what historians do, and what you'll be doing too. So let's get started. I look forward to getting to know you through your work. You can always reach me via email, or by phone during my office hours, or drop by the Zoom meeting, or make an appointment. Use the phone number listed on the syllabus, or contact me by email. I'd really like to get to know you, even though I'm teaching at a distance. And I hope you enjoy this class as much as I do.